Now I want to tell you about Dr. Stenger, because that's who you came to see today. Dr. Vic Stenger is the adjunct professor of philosophy at the University of Colorado and emeritus professor of physics at the University of Hawaii. He's held visiting positions on the faculties at the University of Heidelberg in Germany, Oxford in England, and the University of Florence in Italy. Dr. Stenger's research career spanned the period of great progress in elementary particle physics that ultimately led to the current standard model. In his last project before retiring, Dr. Stenger collaborated on the underground experiment in Japan that showed the first time that the neutrino has mass. The Japanese leader of the project shared the 2002 Nobel Prize in Physics for this discovery. Dr. Stenger has had a parallel career as an author of 10 critically acclaimed popular level books that interface between physics and cosmology and philosophy, religion, and pseudoscience. His 2007 book, God, the Failed Hypothesis, How Science Shows That God Does Not Exist, was a New York Times bestseller, and we have this for sale here today, along with a couple other of his books. And his most recent book is The Fallacy of Fine-Tuning, which we also have today. And I'm just thrilled that Dr. Stenger has come to Pueblo to talk to us, and join me in welcoming him.
Well, thank you very much, Rita, and the rest of you, for being here and for inviting me. Kind of interesting, last week I was in Salt Lake City, and where I was talking at UU, the University of Utah. Here I am at UU again next week. So I calculated what the probability of that was, and it's almost 1 in 500,000. Figure there's something behind all of that, some force. Anyway, I have another interesting announcement to make, and that is that atheists are no longer the most despised group in America. We dropped down to number 2 on the list. And you know what number one group is? The Tea Party. Isn't that good? All right. Glasses on. Okay, I'm going to talk about science and God. It's commonly believed that science has nothing to say about God, that it can't prove or disprove the existence of God. Now, while that's true, we can't prove or disprove the existence of every conceivable God. This is actually not the case for a God with the attributes of the Abrahamic God, the God worshipped by Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Such a God is believed to play such an important role in the operation of the universe and in the lives of humans that his existence should have been confirmed by now. Now, even the most pious believer has to admit that there's no scientific evidence for God. If there were, it would be in the textbooks, along with the evidence for neutrinos, DNA, and so on. But then the believer will say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. However, that isn't always true. Absence of evidence is definitely evidence of absence, when the evidence that's absent is evidence that should be there. For example, there's no evidence for elephants in Rocky Mountain National Park, and if there were elephants there, you would expect to see some evidence. You would see dropping brush bushes and so on. So I think that absence of evidence can be taken as a good sign that elephants don't exist in Rocky Mountain National Park. Now let me cite some examples of the absence of evidence for the Judeo-Christian Islamic God. If such a God existed, we should see evidence that he answers prayers. That's certainly one of the attributes of that God. And reputable scientists from reputable institutions, such as the Mayo Clinic, Harvard, Duke universities, incidentally, these scientists who've done these experiments, they've done carefully controlled experiments. Almost all of them are believers, and we're seeking to find evidence of the existence of God through the efficacy of prayer, and they didn't find any. And these were very good experiments, and I think it at least shows that, while of course, again, you could say that they're not conclusive. Maybe God just didn't decide to answer prayers. The point is, they could have found evidence. God could have answered the prayers, and apparently he didn't. And with billions of prayers being said every day, you would think that by now a few would have been answered. Now, most religions teach that in addition to our physical senses, we possess another inner sense that provides knowledge of a world beyond the natural world. If God reveals truths by such means, we should be able to verify at least some of those truths. For example, if God inspired the Bible, you would think he would have provided it with correct information about the universe. In fact, the story of creation in Genesis bears no resemblance whatsoever to what we have learned from cosmological science. Furthermore, the Bible is filled with errors and contradictions. The absence of evidence that should be there makes many of the major stories of the Bible almost certainly mythical. This includes the most important events of the Bible in both the Old and New Testaments. For example, there's no archaeological evidence, but should be there, for the Exodus, for the Battle of Jericho, for the great empire of David and Solomon. No one has ever found a trace of Solomon's temple. Now, in the case of the New Testament, if Jesus was such an important figure, as the Gospels claim, why is there no mention of him by Roman historians writing of events during his lifetime? Some actually living in Jerusalem. No mention whatsoever. And there was a lot of people writing history in those days. Indeed, we can rule out beyond a reasonable doubt the Gospel versions of the Nativity and the Crucifixion. Neither Bethlehem nor Nazareth appear to have been occupied at the time of Jesus. So there isn't a single shred of evidence, independent of Christian literature, that Jesus described in the Gospels ever existed. Now, myths are often fictions based on people who really existed. So I'm not saying that Jesus wasn't a real person, but the Jesus of the Gospels is surely a myth. Consider the following scenario, just as kind of an amusing scenario. Suppose the bones of a man are unearthed in a cave in Jerusalem. Carbon dating determines them to be precisely 2,000 years old, plus or minus 30 years. Now, they're definitely the bones of a man. However, they're found to have 2 X chromosomes, where as far as we know, all men have both an X and a Y chromosome, while only women have 2 X's. This proves the man had no father, and that a man born of a virgin existed 2,000 years ago, who might reasonably be identified as the Jesus described in the Gospels. So we would have scientific evidence that supports one key Christian belief. However, here's the amusing part. The fact that bones were found would mean that Jesus did not bodily rise from the dead. So one miracle would be confirmed and another falsified. So, well, I mean, this is obviously purely hypothetical, but the point is that it illustrates that science can play a role in establishing the credibility of religious beliefs. I mentioned last week I gave a talk in Salt Lake City, And I told the audience that I was sure there wasn't anyone there who knew less about Mormonism than I did. So I would leave it for them to decide for themselves about whether or not Mormon beliefs are in conflict with archaeological science. And I got a big laugh. See where that audience stood on the issue. Incidentally, it looks like the population of Salt Lake City is about 60% Mormon. When I was there about 50 years ago, must have been close to 100%. So things are changing. Now let me move from the past to the present and our own observations. Many people claim to have had religious experiences, and I don't doubt that most of them are completely sincere about that. If God or the supernatural is glimpsed in a religious experience, we should be able to confirm that by some verifiable fact, at least in some cases. For example, someone might return from a religious experience with knowledge of an impending disaster that no one could have predicted, which then takes place. Now, nothing of the sort has ever happened in all these years, thousands of years. No one predicted the Japanese tornado, tsunami, or the Hurricane Irene, or at least most recently, until some evidence appeared. Until the evidence appeared, there was no knowledge that anything was going to happen. Now, of course, if he wanted to, God could appear before us at any time and perform a few miracles to prove his existence. But that would be rather crass, I think, so let's assume he's more subtle. He could deliberately hide from us, and some theologians make the argument that God needs to be devious so that we will accept him on faith. Now, why he would want to do that escapes me. The perfect God doesn't need to create a universe with troublesome human beings, since he's already perfectly content. And even if he did, why would he want to spend eternity surrounded by clueless toadies? If he sought good conversation, I would think he would prefer the company of Bertrand Russell to Pat Robertson. In short, the world looks just as it should look if there is no God with the attributes of the Abrahamic God. Now, it's true that doesn't eliminate other gods, such as the deist God, that leaves the universe alone, just creates the universe and then forgets about it. That's a carry-on according to the laws that he created. Can't rule out that God, but we can rule out the Judeo-Christian Islamic God to a high degree of probability. Now, whether or not God exists, it's often said that religion is still beneficial to both individuals and society. Let's consider the comfort that's supposed to be provided by belief in an afterlife. Now, that claim, I want to say, is misplaced. The idea that you will live forever gives you a false sense of a glorious self that leads to an unhealthy, extreme self-centeredness and narcissism in this life. You can see this in America today, where everything is me, me, me. Few Christians in America today doubt they are going straight to heaven when they die. Nobody believes in hell anymore. On the other hand, knowing that you're not going to live forever restores a true understanding of your finite place in the scheme of things. And if you do believe in hell, you don't have to worry about it. Well, if you don't believe in it, you don't have to worry about anything. Now let me look at some of the disadvantage of belief in life after death. If you don't believe in an afterlife, you should find more meaning and purpose in this world. And you live your life to the fullest, since it's the only life you have. Obviously, the world is filled with injustice, and many people believe in an afterlife because they think that justice can only be provided in an afterlife. And that's true of many religions, East and West. But if you put your hopes off into an afterlife or justice in this world, then you might not take actions to seek justice in this life. You can see that in India, for example, where the people there don't really try to do anything to really improve their lot if they're the bottom castes, because they've been told that they'll do better in the next life because if they just be good in this life. And you might not exercise your own best judgment in matters. Allow yourself to be controlled by others claim sacred authority. That's true if you believe in any kind of religion. Finally, there's no evidence that religious practice has any health benefits. That's widely claimed, but this is simply not true. They do find benefits of church going, but those experiments that they've done have shown that do not have, for some reason, when they do these experiments, they always avoid having non-believers as a control group. It seems to me a scientifically necessary protocol. And of course, anybody with a healthy lifestyle should have the same benefits that people who go to church have. There's no smoking in church, so that's one advantage. So the personal benefits of religious belief are dubious, to say the least. Now let me move on to the role of religion in society. People of faith are commonly treated with great deference in our society. The religious are assumed to be persons of the highest moral standards, exemplars of goodness, kindness, and charity. But why should that be? How does faith qualify anyone for such high esteem? After all, faith is unquestioning belief in the absence of supportive evidence, and even in the light of contrary evidence. How could one expect such a frame of mind to result in any special insight? How can false beliefs be a guide to life, or the foundation for a successful society? Aren't we being irresponsible to build a society based on faith? Yet we have one of our two major political parties dominated by individuals who want to do just that. Many historians and sociologists have denied that there ever was a war between science and religion. Some have even claimed that Christianity was responsible for science. But they've twisted the historical facts. Greece and Rome were well on the way to modern science when Christianity interrupted the development for 1,000 years. Thankfully, the Islamic Empire was able to preserve and expand on scientific teachings, while Christendom was mired in the Dark Ages. However, both Islam and Christianity were both too inflexible to accommodate what followed, the explosion of science. And that was hardly a product of religion. The scientific revolution in the 18th century Europe happened only after the revolts against church authority and the Renaissance and Reformation opened up new avenues of thought. People could finally think freely. Now, I don't deny that many contemporary scientists are religious, although they are a minority. In fact, only 7% of the members of the National Academy of Sciences, which is the elite group of scientists in the US, believe in a personal God. That's 7%, not 77. Believing scientists have compartmentalized their brains, and I've known many of them over my career. They've compartmentalized their brains into two sections that don't talk to each other. They leave their critical thinking skills at the door when they go to church on Sunday. Well, unless it's Unitarian Universalist Church. One exception. One exception. As far as I know, that's the only exception. On Monday morning, when they return to the lab, God never enters into their equations. The reason for much of the mistrust of science you find in religious circles is the fundamental incompatibility of science and religion. At least evangelicals are honest about it. They understand they're at war with science. On the other hand, liberal and moderate believers are fooling themselves if they think they can be both religious and scientific without being schizophrenic. Now, fundamentalists know full well that science and the Bible disagree over the origin of the universe, the evolution of life, and other questions. Since to them, the Bible is truth by definition, science is simply wrong and must be Christianized. And there's a strong, well-funded effort going on today in America to do just that. However, it seems to me it's going to be hard to Christianize the fact that the Earth is just a tiny, insignificant planet in a universe that probably has about 10 billion trillion planets. And this is just the universe within our horizon. According to modern cosmology, there is an even vaster space exists beyond our horizon, where light cannot reach us in the age of the universe. That's how the horizon is defined. It's about 40 billion light years away. So beyond that universe is this vast space. It's estimated to be 100 orders of magnitude larger than this visible universe of 100 billion galaxies. And yet that all resulted from the same Big Bang. It's still our universe, just this is the part that we can't ever see. Furthermore, cosmology, modern cosmology strongly suggests these days that our universe is just one of an unlimited number of other universes. So how could that be reconciled with the belief that God has sent his only Son, who also happens to be himself, down to earth to die an agonizing death in order to pay for the sin committed by the first humans? And what was that sin? Eating from the tree of knowledge. Why do you think Christians are so opposed to knowledge? The more you know, the less likely you are to be a Christian. Moderate believers do not take the Bible literally, agree with that. And they say they see no conflict between science and their faith, evolution in particular. But when surveys ask them what do they really believe, virtually all of them say that evolution is God-guided. Now, this is not Darwinian evolution. There's no guidance, divine or otherwise, in Darwinian evolution. Guided evolution is just another form of intelligent design. Darwinian evolution is godless. It says humanity was an accident. That's completely incompatible with Christianity, which assumes humans are special creation of God. A fundamental to most, if not all religions, is the notion of divine creation, for which there's no scientific basis. At one time, it seemed impossible that the universe could have come into existence naturally, and that scientifically impossible. Christians saw the success of the Big Bang model as confirmation of the biblical creation stories, although, as I pointed out, there's not much in common between the two stories. But at least the Big Bang seemed to prove that a universe had a beginning, our universe had a beginning, and it followed by their reasoning that the cause of that beginning could only be a personal creator God. Now, modern cosmology has considerably dampened that hope. It's shown that the Big Bang need not have been the beginning of space and time, and that the universe could be eternal. And as I've mentioned, it now seems possible or even likely that our universe is just one of an unlimited number of other universes. Reputable scholars have published several plausible scenarios for the natural origin of our universe. While we cannot say exactly how the universe did come about, these scenarios, which are completely worked out mathematically, published in good journals, consistent with all existing knowledge, so they at least prove that a divine creation is not required by science. Many theologians and others have claimed that the parameters of physics are so delicately balanced that if there was just any slight changes in their values, life would not have been possible. Therefore, they conclude that a creator must have fine-tuned these parameters so that we, in our form of life, would evolve. Now, this claim can be refuted on several fronts. The most popular explanation among most physicists and cosmologists is that many universes exist, and we just happen to live in the one suited for us. However, even if one universe exists, adequate explanations within existing knowledge can be found for the values of the most crucial parameters. Others can be shown to have ranges that make some form of life, not necessarily exactly our form of life, but some form of life probable. That's what my book, the most recent book, Fallacy with Fine-Tuning, was all about, to show that. Incidentally, it has a lot of equations in it, so if you buy that book, you can read, if you don't know the math is at about the level of sophomore physics, or chemistry, or engineering, or math major in college. But if you don't have that math skill, you can still skip the math, and I do try to explain everything in words as well. Because the math is there to show that I'm not just waving my arms, that I can show this quantitatively, that there's no need for fine-tuning of the constants of physics. Now, for centuries, theologians have argued that the observed order we see around us is evidence for divine design in the universe. However, the universe does not look at all as if it were designed by a perfect, all-powerful, benevolent God. It's too imperfect, too filled with evil and suffering. And as time has gone by, science has provided plausible explanations for the order that exists. Actually, the universe is not as orderly as you might think it is. We live in the orderly part of the universe, and so that gives us a false impression of a very orderly universe. In fact, most of the particles of the universe are in random motion, and only one part of 100,000 parts of the universe show any structure at all. Mostly random. Proponents of intelligent design creationism argue that the complex structure we observe from our own special viewpoint requires an architect and a builder, and that natural processes cannot generate increasing complexity. Well, they're wrong. The generation of complex systems from simpler systems, natural generation without an organizer, can be seen in many physical situations, such as the phase transitions, in which water goes naturally from a gas to a liquid to a solid. That's the natural movement of water. There's no external energy. Now, we're used to ice melting into liquid water, and then maybe liquid water boiling into gas, but that's because we're feeding energy in. If you don't have any energy at all, if you have no heat, the natural tendency is automatically to go from a gas to a liquid to a solid, with increasing complexity at each stage. So the incompatibility between science and religion is very real. wouldn't matter much. It was just an academic dispute between theologians and scientists. Unfortunately, religion seriously hampers science from being put to use for the benefit, indeed the very survival of humanity. Darwinian evolution is the foundation of modern biology. Yet in America, our best biological knowledge is not being taught in many, if not most, high schools. This neglect is bound to ultimately have a negative impact on the human health sciences as well as basic biological research. When beliefs in ancient myths join with other negative forces in our society, they hinder the world from advancing scientifically, economically, and socially at a time when rapid advance in these areas is absolutely essential for the survival of humanity. We now may be only about a generation or two away from the catastrophic problems predicted to result from global warming, pollution, and overpopulation. Now, I know that human-caused global warming is a very controversial issue. Whatever the truth, let's say, whether or not current warming trend, which is definite, is caused by human activity, surely this finite planet cannot withstand the continuation of humanity's current exponential growth in population and the exploitation of natural resources. Something has to give, and give soon. Now, I'm not saying anything that I'm sure you haven't heard before. The less familiar argument that I want to emphasize is the cause of the problem can be laid, at least partially, at the feet of religion, at the foot of religion. Assuming religion has only one foot. And its unsupportable positions on which when life begins, reproductive rights, environmental controls, as well as a general distrust of science. Powerful corporate interests are exploiting religion in order to cast doubt upon the work of climate scientists and others who are warning us against the dangers ahead. Now, this is dirty politics, not legitimate scientific debate. The role of religion in climate change denialism is not widely appreciated. This becomes clearer when you see that the same people who are promoting creationism are involved in global warming denialism. Let me give one example. The Cornwall Alliance for the Stewardship of Creation has issued what they call an evangelical declaration on global warming. Let me quote from that declaration. Quote, "We believe Earth and its ecosystems created by God's intelligent design and infinite power and sustained by his faithful providence are robust, resilient, self-regulating, and self-correcting, admirably suited for human flourishing and displaying his glory. We deny that Earth and its ecosystems are fragile and unstable products of chance, and particularly that Earth's climate system is vulnerable to dangerous alteration because of minuscule changes in atmospheric chemistry." Unquote. In other words, trust in God, he won't let us destroy the Earth. Could there be any better example of a folly of faith? The statement I just read was signed by over 500 evangelicals, including many prominent preachers and theologians. Now, if you're wondering what the connection, religious connection could be, possibly be, between opposition to evolution and to global denialism, they both describe a world that is constantly changing, while the Bible and Christian tradition describe a world that is unchanging, that is static. At least it is until Jesus returns, which he said it would be 2,000 years ago for his generation, but we're still waiting. In conclusion, it's time for scientists and other rationalists to join together to put a stop to those who claim they have some sacred right to decide what kind of society the rest of us must live in. We must act for the sake of the betterment of humankind and the future of our planet. Now, based on the favorable signs that young people are increasingly abandoning religion. And incidentally, the latest surveys showed that that in the age group 18 to 29, only 28% of young people belong now to any organized religion. And it's growing, constantly growing. 15% of the general public, which is also growing. So I have hope that in another generation, America will join Europe and the rest of the developed world in casting off the rusty chains of ancient superstition that stand as an impediment to human survival. And I just hope it's not too late. Thanks very much. Yeah, I'm ready for questions. Now please, since there isn't another microphone, please stand up and speak loudly because I'm pretty deaf. I was always deaf at my left ear, and as I got older, I got increasingly deaf at my right ear, so you'll have to speak up. Yes, anybody want to ask anything or comment? Yes, please.
I've seen a couple of your debates with William Lane Craig, and Craig is very slick with his physics and whatnot, and listening to him as not a physics person, it seems very convincing. To someone like yourself or other physicists, is it essentially just like, well, you're talking nonsense, and yeah, what you say sounds good to maybe other people, but nobody really takes it very seriously? Or are there physicists who do say, well, yeah, I can see where he's coming from, sort of thing?
No, I don't think that he's accurate in many of the claims that he's made. In fact, both he and Dinesh D'Souza is another one who's a great debater. They're both great debaters. And they've lifted quotations out of context, for example, from Stephen Hawking's book, 1988, A Brief History of Time, when they talk about there was this singularity that Craig, for 30 years, he's been arguing that the universe had to have a beginning because of the singularity that Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking had said it would exist at the beginning of the universe. They wrote a paper, and it goes back to 1970, predicting such a singularity. Singularity is an infinite point, an infinitesimal point of infinite energy density. And this followed from Einstein's general theory of relativity. And the theorem was correct as far as it just assumed the general theory of relativity. But the general theory of relativity is not a quantum theory. And the quantum theory says that there isn't such a singularity. Now in 1988, and when Hawking wrote his big blockbuster bestseller, he has a sentence in there where he says, Penrose and I showed that the universe began in a singularity. They lift that out of context, both of them. And in fact, much of Christian literature is followed with this. They just read their own stuff. A few pages later, in fact, I can give you the pages. Page 120 is the first quotation, page 128 is the next quotation. And in that quotation, Hawking says, now I find myself, he kind of laughs about it. He says, here I was became famous trying to tell everybody the universe began in a singularity, and now I'm famous again for telling them it didn't. because of the theory not being a quantum theory. But Craig uses that argument over and over again before unsophisticated audiences. So he doesn't use it when two times he debated me, he didn't use it. Okay. Another question? Yeah.
In the animal world, it's apparent that animals don't think about life beyond death. Somehow, in the evolution of the human being, we concocted the story about life after death as a result of a reduction of anxiety. In other words, when we think we're going to live forever, we can go along living. But if we think that life is finite, causes great anxiety. Have you heard of that theory about how we develop the God hypothesis?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of literature on the evolution of religion. And it's pretty clear that it's not biological based. I mean, our brains today are not terribly different from the human brains 150, 200,000 years ago. So biological evolution is very slow. So the evolution was a social evolution. It was when people began to get smarter and talk to one another. Particularly, talking to one another is a big step in the development of humans. And so they started getting these ideas, and you can find evidence that people were already burying their dead in kind of a ritual way 50, 70,000 years ago. But I have kind of my own little explanation of that. And that is, you can imagine a shaman, and he walks through the woods and he stumbles across some black powder, and he discovers that it can you throw it in a fire and it causes an explosion. And so he uses this in trying to convince people that he's got special powers. So a lot of religion, I think, was just a result of people in power discovering that it was a very powerful tool to use in controlling society. The kings and the priests took advantage of this, and you can see this all throughout history. And you still see it today. That's part of my message is it's still going on today with these people who want to convince the politicians to give them special benefits, not to raise taxes and so on. They've convinced the small group of people that this is the way God wants it. And that's one of the interesting things. There have been studies that showed that over the last 20, 30 years, that the people of the lower income bracket have tended to vote Democrat, and people of higher income have tended to vote Republican, but there's been an exception, and that is in the evangelical Christian community. They vote Republican no matter what, no matter how poor they are, they still vote Republican. So you see there's some connection there. And people have begun to talk about how within our brains we developed early in our history during caveman times this need to put an agent behind everything you observe. Because when you're walking through the woods and you see a little rustle of leaves, you have to be hyperactive about that, because it might be a predator. And so you might be wrong most of the time, but at least you survive. Whereas if you didn't have that hyperactive detection device, it's called, you would not last very long. So there was this need at one time to ascribe agency when there wasn't any agency there, and that's what we do when we give an explanation for a phenomenon and say, well, that was something supernatural, when it was just some random phenomenon. There's lots of literature on that. Yeah. Yes, please.
Do you believe that something major is going to happen in 2012? Do you believe in all the rumors about 2012, like the world's going to end, or do you believe in any of that?
Well, let me put it this way. I'm willing to take a bet with you. And I'll bet you that the world doesn't end. And if the world ends, you win the bet. Yes?
I'm curious what you would say to Stephen Jay Gould if he were alive today. And I'm sorry. I'm curious what you would say to Stephen Jay Gould if he were alive today. In his book Rock of Ages, you're familiar with it, he argues, right, that science and religion occupy different, quote, magisteria, and provided that each didn't trample on the other's turf, science dispelling the myths, and religion claiming that science has no morality or to it, and things like that, that they could actually coexist. So I'm just kind of curious how you
That's
would
called
say,
NOMA,
respond to him.
NOMA, non-overlapping magisteria. And it's actually, nobody agrees with that. I mean, everybody who's read that, when it commented on it, said that he was really trying to redefine religion as moral philosophy. And sure, if religion was just moral philosophy, then maybe you could do this. But even I claim that even science is not precluded from talking about morality, because after all, morality involves human behavior. And human behavior is something we can observe. Anything you observe is part of science. So they overlap enormously. And in fact, the next book that I have, that'll be out next year, it's called God and Folly of Faith, the Incompatibility of Science and Religion. Thanks, I got a plug in for it. And in that, I show that there's this huge incompatibility between the two. I'll talk a little bit about it today, but the huge incompatibility, they never can be reconciled, despite many claims that they can't be. They claim they can't be. Okay, way in the back.
So if humans are an accident, then what's the point of it all? I mean, why should we live good lives? And, maybe John Dillinger and Pablo Escobar had it right. Get all you can and get out. I mean,
well, the point is that we do live lives of meaning.
Why though?
Why not? It's all we have. We might as well try to make the most of it.
Well, no, I'm talking a lot of mean, like living by what the religions in the past have taught. Live in faith, hope, and charity. And not many people really,
Well, it's a phony claim that morality, for example, and ethics comes from religion. Religion stole it from humanism, from humanity. Humans invented morals for the reason that they wanted to be able to live together well. In order to live together well, live together peacefully, you come up with a set of rules, and that's what our moral rules and our ethical rules are. And why don't we just accept that? In fact, that's one of the beauties, I think, of being a humanist or an atheist, is that you do have a moral code that you can live by, and nobody else is telling you what to do. It's not relative morality because everybody agrees on it. It's not just the case of an individual deciding for himself or herself how to behave, because there's a lot of social pressure to conform to a set of rules. We all live by that, and if we didn't, obviously it would be a very unhealthy society. But it's not that. If you look at those countries like Denmark and Sweden and Norway, the Scandinavian countries where religious belief is practically zero, they are the healthiest, happiest countries in the world. And they have the smoothest running societies. On almost every measure, the amount of crime, the amount of abuse, family abuse, it's far less than it is in the U.S. And there's a direct connection between these things and religion in the U.S. Yeah.
I'm a writer, so that's why I want to get a good angle for the story. What about the Shroud of Turin? You have one side that says it is legit, one side, that's a scientific, provenable thing, right? I mean, what are the, I hear one side say it is legit, and the other one says it's a forgery. I mean, that's something that can be tested, right?
Well, I think among the majority of the scientists who really know about this subject, you know, you run into the same thing all the time. You will see in evolution, you know, people who are opposed to evolution, they'll say, well, we have this handful of scientists over here. But you find that the real experts on the subject have no doubt that it's a forgery. It's dated to the Middle Ages. There was a recent claim about blood. It's paint. It's shown to be paint. There's a nice book on that, on the shroud. I forget the exact title, but the shroud of return is in the title. It's by a guy by the name of Joe Nickell. And he goes through all the arguments. So it seems to be little doubt that it was a forgery. Furthermore, there wasn't any information about it prior to that time. And the people, the church figures who were involved with the original discovery said it was, at that time, in the 13th century, said it was a forgery at that time. So it's just something that's been puffed up. Yes?
The most brilliant scientists from the 21st century would probably look at the most brilliant scientists from the 17th century and say he didn't understand very well at all how the world works. So I can see that the most brilliant scientists from the 25th century would look at the brilliant scientists from the 21st century and say they didn't understand how the world works, so how can a 21st century scientist prove anything?
Well, here I am, the most brilliant scientist in the 21st century. And I will tell you that I don't know any scientists who don't regard Isaac Newton as the greatest scientist of all times. Maybe Einstein was second. Einstein was certainly the greatest of the 20th century. And I think neither of them are going to lose their place in history, ever. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
It's often been said regarding atheism that it's only the idea that we disbelieve in any gods. It doesn't have any other kind of ramifications or belief systems to it at all. But when it comes to things involved in our government, like fundamentalist Christianity, involved in the Republican Party, dominionism, and beliefs like that are actively pursuing political goals, what would be your opinion about atheists organizing themselves politically as kind of a way to counteract those kind of things?
Yeah, in fact, there's a split in atheism, as you probably know, between what are called the accommodationists and the new atheists. And I like to include myself as one of the new atheists, who are confrontationalists, let's say. And that is that the accommodationists basically say that, look, religion is here, we have to live with it, and so we should not make all these people mad at us. They might cut our funding, and so we should just let live. The confrontationalists say, okay, that's a good argument because there are important issues like the teaching of evolution in schools, and we have support for that. However, the issues are much bigger than that. That religion itself is such a detrimental force in society, and it's based on nonsense that we just should not just ignore that. Why, when other people in other areas speak nonsense, they told us nonsense, why should we hold back just because it's religion? So yes, organizing politically, we're doing that. It's really growing. students on campus. You should see all the growing secular groups, they call it, the Secular Student Alliance, has been growing fantastically, with starting from just a few groups, and in just a few years they have right now about 30 or so across the country. So they're still going. They're heading in the right direction. Yeah.
Just a quick follow-up on that. Actually, there's a lot of organization on that part. Like you said, it's mainly a split within atheism itself, of folks saying that.
Speak up a little bit.
Folks saying that they, atheists don't have but that one belief, so they shouldn't organize politically because they have nothing else they can see eye to eye on. I personally believe that they have that one thing of preserving the separation of church and state, proper scientific education for our children in common is something we need to fight for politically. So I asked about your opinion just because I think it's actually relevant. I'm actually a member and the state leader of the National Atheist Party in Colorado, where we're fighting for exactly that. And it's a national party. We just got registered 5527.
Sure.
So I did just want to hear your opinion. Wanted to hear what you thought on the subject.
Well, I mean, my opinion is not that important. It's obviously something.
Well, we're all here to hear you.
That I think, my opinion is that it's good for society, good for humanity to move in that direction.
I wanted to let you all know that we have we're possibly starting a humanist group in Pueblo, the Pueblo Humanist Directions, PhD. So we have a sign-up sheet in the back. If you're interested, sign up and we'll contact you. Also, we have Dr. Stenger's, some of his books for sale in the back, and a lot of free literature on the table. Please help yourself. And tomorrow morning at our service at 10:30, Dr. Stenger will be here and we'll continue the discussion. So you're certainly all invited to come tomorrow morning. Thank you. We'll also have a book signing if you'd like that.
How am I going to make my